I'm going live now. Let's see if I'm able to go live here. We got folks here. Just one moment and we'll begin.
Looks like we have a few people joining us.
Yeah.
21, 22 people.
Yeah, growing. Yeah. Amen.
Peter says hello.
Good evening. On behalf of the New York City Council of Mennonite Churches, Groundswell, and the Brooklyn Peace Center, welcome to Teaching Peace. This online series meets every Tuesday at 5 p.m. for about an hour, and there will be an opportunity for breakout rooms at the end of our time together for those who'd like to keep the conversation going. Peace manifests in many ways. Inner peace. How do we cultivate a deep sense of calm and presence in the world that, especially these days, can too often weigh heavy? Interpersonal peace. How do we care for the relationships we have? And then there's the peace that is the desired result of the movement for social change and equity. The poet David, who wrote the Psalms, writes that justice and peace kiss. How do we work for peace when there seems to be an overwhelming amount of injustice in the world? Over the course of this online series, we'll hear from leaders in the field of peace building and wrestle with these weighty topics.
Jason, I see a couple of comments. People are asking about the translation, so you may want to let them know how to how to tune into that translation.
Great. Well, let's get that out up front. So Julio Pabon is our blessed brother who is here to translate for us. And if you would prefer to hear this in Spanish, you can go to the dashboard and click where it says English, click that, and you would click Spanish. That might be Amen, brother. Okay, great. And then I would wait to translate unless people click on Spanish, and then I believe you should be notified to know that you should do Spanish. Merv writes, one needs to click on interpretation and then one, yes, what I was sharing there. So maybe hang tight until we see that we need an interpreter. Yes, good. Good. Well, if there are any questions, please post them in the chat section. On the dashboard, you just click chat and you can either private message any of the panelists, or you can send a message to everyone. So welcome. My name is Jason Storbakken. I serve as the pastor at Manhattan Mennonite Fellowship, a church that is part of the New York City Council of Mennonite Churches. And on that council, I am on the education committee with my dear sister, Addie Banks, who is our chair. I pass to you, Addie.
Yes, welcome everyone. We're so grateful that you can be part of this Helping Pastors to Thrive, our theological series on peace building. I am the co-chair, as my brother said, of the New York City Council of Mennonite Churches Education Committee, and I'm also the CEO and Executive Director of the Groundswell Group, which is a peace and justice resource center rooted in Anabaptist values. I'd like to introduce to you now our brother Glen Guyton. He is the Executive Director of Mennonite Church USA. I have known him for many years, and I could go on and on about his introduction. He has a lot of experience as a leader, as a pastor, and as deeply rooted in the Anabaptist values. He comes from the military to the Mennonite Church. So you want to listen in deeply to hear this story. Brother Glen Guyton from Texas, right here today.
All right. Thank you so much, Addie and Jason. It's great to be here. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of this, and just want to say hello to everyone that is tuning in, whether you're tuning in on Zoom or Facebook or whatever, however you're watching this. Thank you. It's an honor to be here today to share with you.
So our brother Jason, should I start with our first question?
Yeah, that sounds wonderful.
So Glen, you have a very powerful story of coming into this peace building rooted Anabaptist vision. So how do you define peace?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. We all have our probably definition of what we think peace is, and a lot of it, I think, sometimes has to do with our circumstances, right? So a lot of people probably would see peace as somewhat of a state of being, but I really think that peace is a state of mind. And if you think about peace and look up some of the definitions, it says that peace is freedom from disturbance, but it's also submission. I think we have to submit to peace, and not only think about peace based on what's going on, like our circumstances, our situations, because often those things can be very tumultuous. But I see peace as being really a state of mind.
Mm.
Well, I want to kind of follow up on that a little bit. So you went from, like Addie said, the military to the Mennonites.
Right.
Seems like there was some deep disturbance going on. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's probably
happening? Yeah,
it's probably not as spiritual as it should be. I think that one of the things is I've always considered myself probably a peaceful person, and growing up early on, was really familiar with Dr. Martin Luther King and the civil rights movement, people like Muhammad Ali, who, chose not to fight in war. So as I thought about peace in that way, it was really more connected to a specific kind of, I guess, genre of peace. And I didn't really have the theology of peace behind it as I tried to figure out who I was. And so, it wasn't really a disconnect for me to get into military. I didn't get in the military to go and fight and to go shoot people or anything like that. You have to remember that I'm a Gen Xer, and so I graduated from high school in 1988. So Vietnam was history to me. There was no Gulf War. Being in the military was a way for me to go to college, and I really didn't have a language of peace, in the same sense that you would as an Anabaptist. I did understand it as a means to an end in a civil rights type movement, but the theology of peace wasn't there. I didn't find that theology until I became a part of the the Mennonite Church and got an understanding. And I would say that I just had done my research and I really loved the Anabaptist theology, but in actuality, I saw this girl working out in the gym and I asked her out on a date and she said, well, I go to church. And I said, well, I go to church too. What church do you go to? And she took me to Calvary Community Church in Hampton, Virginia. And that happened to be, a Mennonite church.
That's
and,
C3. Isn't that the fastest growing Mennonite church?
It was. It's a pretty good sized church. I don't know if, size now wise where it is, but it's still a very large, very active church. Leslie Francisco, the daughter Leslie Francisco just took over as the pastor. So I'm happy to see that. I was her youth pastor. She was a flower girl in my wedding. So I'm glad to see that young woman, take over the leadership from her father. But yeah, that church still has a rich legacy. And I got really involved in that church and visited a couple of times, rededicated my life to Christ at that time. I mean, I was raised in the church. I was raised in a Presbyterian church, but Calvary was the place where I got the opportunity to have a more mature relationship with Christ. And then as I became involved in that church, Virginia Conference was working with Mennonite Central Committee, MCC at the time, to study Mennonites and their connection to the military, because the Tidewater area of Virginia, that Norfolk, Virginia Beach area, is full of military bases. That's why I was there. I was in the Air Force. And so Bishop Francisco asked me if I would be willing to meet with leaders from MCC. He told me a little bit about the peace theology and asked me would I be willing to share my perspective with them. And I was like, yeah, I'll talk to those hippies. I'm a Christian. I don't know what they're talking about. Wow. And that kind of began my journey on understanding the Jesus way of peace and connecting it to theology. I met my good friend Titus Peachy. I say that Leslie Francisco III is my spiritual father, and Titus Peachy is my Anabaptist father. So he actually befriended me, and Titus was an interesting person to me when I met him and started to hear about how he was living his life and what the peace theology meant to him. And that relationship really, it was transformative. And how we interacted and how he shared with me was very transformative.
Amen.
So Glenn, you joined the Mennonite Church in 1993, mm-hmm. and in 2009, you began working to promote intercultural relations. You became the first African-American executive director of MC USA in 2018. Mm-hmm. As a Black man, a Texan, a veteran, you have self-identified as an outsider in the denomination which you lead. What insights have you gained from that outsider status? Because many of the pastors in New York City are outsiders in that same way.
Right. Well, I think, and my first job in the Mennonite Church was with Mennonite Mutual Aid. Mm. And so when I left the military, as a conscientious objector in 1998. And my first job was with, Mennonite Mutual Aid, which is Everidge now. And so I did that for a few years before becoming a youth pastor at C3. But I think that part of the American story, if you're an African-American male, is you're always kind of an outsider, right? You're always kind of seen as a threat. You always have to learn how to work with the traditional white establishment in a way that's non-threatening. And so to be successful in the military, to be successful in really any aspect of society, you're always kind of one step removed from the internal systems. So that's no different, I think, than for racial ethnic people coming into the Mennonite Church, or maybe even women in leadership in the Mennonite Church. But what one of the things that I do think that I see is that just in general, everyone's different, but people that identify as convinced Mennonites, I think, have a different appreciation of Anabaptist theology than those that may more closely associated to the ethnic identity. I think that for some of us that have come from the outside, we really value the theology, and we see what a gift Anabaptist theology, Mennonite theology is to the rest of the Christian community. And I think sometimes it's hard for people that have the ethnic tie to see it. Not that they don't appreciate the theology, but it's just like anything, you get used to it. If you've been immersed in something, even as you walk around your house today, if I walked in your house today for the first time, I would see things that you've just kind of, that your eyes just kind of glaze over. You don't appreciate some of the things that you see on a daily basis. But me as an outsider, you notice things, you understand the value in the message. And it allows me to, I think about who we are especially as Mennonite Church USA. It allows me to think about Mennonite Church USA as a gift to other people, that this is something we should be sharing more broadly, that as we think about loss, I'll often hear people with the ethnic Mennonite identity talk about how much is being lost, or our schools don't have a high enough percentage of basically white ethnic Mennonites. And I say, hey, what a great opportunity you have to reach these other people that have come to be a part of your institution from the highways and the byways. You brought all these people in. What a wonderful opportunity that you have to share this precious gift. This is something that you can't contain within your small community, but it's something that needs to branch out, because it's transformative, right? It transformed me, transformed my family, it transformed the Francisco family, the Bankses, all the people that we've tapped into from all around the globe, and through our mission projects, through our service projects. We say, hey, this is who we are as Mennonites, and those people have said, hey, give me more of that, and have become a part of it. And so it just troubles me sometimes when people that are on the inside say, oh, we're losing this, when there's so much opportunity for growth and transformation. If you do like my brother Titus Peachy and say, hey, this is how I'm living my life, let me talk to you about it.
Amen.
Witness.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's a lot of that insider, outsider. It can, within religion, within Christianity, and within the Mennonite Church as well. James Cone, I was studying at Union Theological Seminary when he was still alive. He said that often, and this might apply to Mennonites as well as anyone, and maybe even more so, said that often people of European descent, or white people like myself, are often prone to run to reconciliation while ignoring the work of liberation. And he used to talk about how the foot of the oppressor is still firmly planted upon the neck of the oppressed. Yet they're putting the right hand of fellowship out, in a sense, to bring reconciliation. How might peace building inform the work of liberation and reconciliation?
Yeah, I think that's a challenging one as we think about the church and the work that needs to be done. I think very often, I'll use to say forgiveness. We want to forgive people in the church before healing can take place. It's hard to basically reconcile, put things back in the right order if the system is still messed up. So as we think about racism, I use a very specific definition of that. It talks about power and privilege. Racism has to do with an abuse of power and privilege in systems. It's not just you don't like me, or that you hate me personally in your heart, but it's actually systems that are designed to keep me from getting ahead. And so you can talk about reconciliation all you want, but if you don't dismantle the structural aspects of oppression, you really haven't changed anything. Some type of transformation needs to happen, occur in a relationship. And so as we think about, peace, again, if I say peace is a state of mind, we have to change how we think about things and understand that change that benefits someone else doesn't detract from who we are. I think that's the problem that we're having in our society at this point, even with this the COVID virus. people feel like, well, if you make me wear a mask, you're hurting me, you're doing something. Now, if you have some type of trauma, PTSD, I can understand that. But just because you're just angry because you're wearing a mask to help your brother feel safer, you know, you have to act out, or you have to lash out. You know, that's not peace, right? That's not creating an environment that brings about reconciliation, healing, that brings about hope. You know, we're so entrenched in our rights and us being able to express ourselves that we forget what other people are going through. So I think that's part of the what we need to think about as we think about reconciliation, peace. We have to kind of shift perspectives and to see how what we're doing may be disturbing other people, how other people are impacted by our actions, our systems, our attitudes, all those things, I think, kind of go hand in hand.
Yeah, it sounds like so many things intersect, you know,
Yeah.
like you were talking about earlier, that inner peace. If you don't have that inner peace, if you haven't found your own peace yet, it's hard to enter into the work of peace building, just because you're coming with all that other stuff. And it's active. Imagine you have to remain active and to take that continual posture of learning and growing and deepening, stay engaged in this work.
Mm-hmm. Well, I see a question, Jason. Maybe I'll about PJS and curriculum. I'm not really familiar with that curriculum, but I can talk a little bit about people returning from war. You know, I've had some experience with you know, people that are veterans and a few people that have PTSD, and I think that no one is more of an advocate for peace than people that have been to war. I think they understand the realities of what happens once you actually see that face to face, and I don't think you come through those things unscathed. So anytime that we can care for people that have been through traumatic experiences, I think that we have an obligation to do so as the body of Christ. And we can work with some of those people to be the greatest assets that we have in regards to peace theology, because they have experienced war and the pain and cost of war firsthand. Now that also needs to be happen on the other side with people that are impacted by our soldiers, right? I remember a conversation I had with my son one day when we went to a church, and I think it was the 4th of July or Memorial Day or something. They had all these, you know, the flags and all the patriotic pomp and circumstance in church. And, you know, we're going to pray for our soldiers. We're going to pray for, you know, I don't know, God's victory or whatever. And, you know, and I thought about that. I told my son, I said, you know, son, I said, it's Christians and it's people that pray and that have faith in these other countries too. It's not, America is just doesn't have God's blessing. These other people love God and have a right to live and to live their lives. And so it's not just, you know, rah America, and what we do has no repercussions. And so we have to think about that again, you know, thinking about the other and looking at different perspectives. So if we have the opportunity to bring healing to any community, I think that we take that opportunity.
Glenn, you talked about dismantling racism and the structural racism. Most of us who are in urban communities are using this in very real and practical ways in the real world. And I think this is some of what you touched on about people who have been in this, who live in it, may not understand the value of it in the real world and how it can impact and change systems. Can you just talk a little bit about the way this is happening in our church around dismantling racism in our own structures, so that we can also see how we can take that into the world and begin to use that? I know we're a little behind the curve in some of these things, but in some ways we've made some real progress.
Well, you know, we just have to keep working at it. I think that's one of the things. And we have to be able to shift perspectives, you know, go from this monocultural mindset to more of a global mindset, if you would, or just, you know, being able just to see from someone else's perspective other than our own. You know, as you think about diversity and inclusion, so not just racism, but just being, you know, talking about inclusion of people, and I'm talking about, I use eight different identity factor. So don't try to pin me down on one. So I'm just saying, like, as we think race is one of them, nationality, 8 others that I talk about, abilities, how do we become more inclusive? We have to think about that in our systems. Who do we serve? What is the opportunity? Do people have access to the resources and things that they need to grow and to be better people? Can they live their lives in such a manner where they can worship and praise God openly and freely? And then, do we have, good distribution systems, or do we provide people opportunities for people to utilize their gifts? So that's the other thing. So, can they live their life, worship God freely? Do they have the ability to utilize their God-given gifts, and do they have access to the things that they need? That's what we have to think about. And in our system, we do have some limitations. There are some structural limitations to our diversity and inclusion practices in Mennonite Church USA that are real. We have our headquarters is located in one place. We have, 2 physical headquarters, one in Newton, Kansas, and one in Elkhart, Indiana. Is there anything necessarily wrong with those 2 places? No. Do those places have a great deal of racial diversity? No. So it's a barrier that you need to think of when you think about what the church does. We have some things that we celebrate that come from a specific, ethnic heritage. Are those things wrong? No, they are not wrong. But how do we make space for people that come from different traditions without condemning it? When people say, well, that's not Mennonite. What do you mean that's not Mennonite? Am I not Mennonite because I sing maybe with a different style or a different voice inflection, or I like different food? I don't share. Maybe I actually am 6% Swiss German, just by the way. I did the DNA test. But just because I don't, focus on other specific things that you may focus on that are more cultural, traditional, that are outside the theology. So we just have to be mindful of those things and continue to work on it. But it's challenging. And just to be realistic, because, a leader who has not been connected to Mennonite theology or the Mennonite church, or hasn't gone to a Mennonite church in a number of years, if they have the right Mennonite name, they can instantly come back into the church and serve and be in leadership. Sometimes I feel like I'm defending the traditional ethnic Mennonite perspective with white ethnic Mennonites who don't have any sense of clue about the traditions, because I've been in it for so long, for over 25 years. I know our systems to a certain extent. So I'm an outsider with an insider's knowledge, but then I see insiders with no knowledge that can come in instantly and actually have more gravitas than people that have served for 25 years based on their family heritage. That's a reality, right? I'm not saying that those people don't deserve to be leaders. I think that if people want to be a part of the church and be connected, they can do that. But you have to understand that that's a barrier to some people, because if you come from the right, the right family line, you will get the first look versus someone else that may not get a look. They have to try a little bit harder to be recognized in our system. And so we have good people from all different backgrounds. So hear me. I appreciate the cultural and heritage, the cultural and the heritage of the Swiss German, the Russian German Mennonites. I love it. I learned about potato water and beer rocks and Brunswick stew, all those things. And, I add those things to who I am as a Mennonite, but they don't make me Mennonite. It's the theology that makes me Mennonite.
Well, if you're looking for a new headquarters, New York City will be a great place for it. And there's a lot of things on the horizon in New York. There's a follow-up question. Following up from that, talking about the DREAM Act and how it requires our neighbors who were brought to the U.S. as children, required to get a college degree or serve in the military. This person's asking, what resources does the denomination make available to dreamers who want to stay in the U.S. can't afford college?
Yeah, that's a good question, actually, and this is where I think we have to understand who we are as Mennonite Church USA and what's been set up. Now, we are working on a peace tax fund. My friend Sue Parker, I think she's on here. She's working on that peace tax fund to help us, with people that want to leave the military. That was one of the questions I had. I had people that may be impacted by the choice to not register for selective service. We have some funds, some really low, no interest loans and things available for people that make those choices to help with education and even maybe some legal things. So we're putting more information out about that. But one of the things is that, we as Mennonites really believe in community. So our conferences and local congregations really are important. And one of the things that I see, I'm kind of going on a little separate rabbit trail. One of the things I see the problems coming out of COVID-19 is that we put all this emphasis on our central government, the national government, and so much trust in things that are removed from our local community that we have a problem. We can't get food. We have plenty of food in America, but we can't get it to the people that need to get it. Why? Because we only have 118 or something like that, 118 processing plants for the whole United States. We don't have a local distribution. We don't have local farmers per se. And so our church is set up so that the local congregation and the local conference really provides the bulk of the support. We can provide some information. We can connect you to national, national programs that may be able to provide some resources, but the denomination isn't necessarily a funding model per se. Even when I got out of the military, I met with the local Quaker house. The Quakers actually helped me get out of the military. So, and so then what did I do? In turn, I gave back to the Quakers and thank them for the work. But the national MCC, I think, helped put me in contact with the local. So I think one of the biggest things that we can do is help provide resources and point people to those local resources. But we can provide information, and if we have relationships with these national bodies, we try to do those things. And I would also encourage, if you go to a Mennonite school, just ask, say, hey, what's available to me? They do provide scholarships and other things in order to have a more diverse population.
There's a question. I might be able to field this one. And
okay.
How is the denomination empowering the birth of peace communities in our nation? Well, we have a great resource in the Mennonite Church USA called the Mennonite Mission Network. And part of their whole work is to plant peace churches across the U.S. I'm part of a group that's planting the Brooklyn Peace Church about a mile from where I live. And as part of that, there's also the Brooklyn Peace Center. Mennonite Mission Network is hosting a webinar. I think it's Monday the 11th. You can find more information. We'll post that, where they're talking about some of these peace communities.
Yeah. This is one question from Alfonso Alexander. I want to answer that about, I said this peace is a state of mind. I do believe that. I do want to believe that peace is a state of mind. And I'll say this is just for me. I'm just talking for Glenn. I'm not talking for everybody else. One day I said, hey, God, I was going through some stuff. I said, hey, God, it's a scripture that talks about Jesus leaving us with peace. John 14:27, peace I leave with you. I said, well, God, if you're giving away peace, I'm going to take it. I'm going to take you up on that offer, and I'm going to believe you, God, for your peace. And it's something that I remind myself of on a regular basis, daily basis. God, I believe you for your peace. Whatever I'm going through, I'm going to have peace about it. Now, does that mean I don't believe in good mental health, or going, taking medicine if you need medicine, or going to a counselor if you have trauma? No, I think those are things that are very important. So if you have PTSD, if you have anxiety, if you have depression, go to a professional. But I also believe too that, as there are some things, some exercises, like I have I'm 50 now, right? So my shoulder is hurting. So I do some things at home that I do, but I also went to the doctor, right? And the doctor did some things and helped me with my shoulder, but I also do some exercises. If my shoulder starts to act up, I do some exercises at home on my own. And so that's part of my exercise for my mental health is, hey, God, I believe you for your peace. If I need to go see a therapist, I will go see a therapist. So you do the things that you need to do. And part of that is, again, that state of mind. But, I try not to focus on the circumstances of things that are going on in my life to really have that impact. But if there are some things medically that I need to take care of, hey, yeah, take care of yourself.
Well, Glenn, in the Mennonite Church, we believe that we are on the way with Jesus. So that Jesus is actually in all the aspects of our lives, and that Jesus provides a way for us to engage in all the processes, because we're quite a Christological faith where Jesus is the model and the mentor for us. How would you say we are advancing that today in our church?
In the Mennonite Church, well, I mean, I think, part of our theology really focuses on that, on the life of Christ. So walking with Jesus, as I've assumed this role of leadership, that's one of the things that I want to focus on, and say, that Christ is, at the center of who we are. Jesus is the example that we need to follow. And so I think that we do a really good job of that, preaching the gospel and our understanding of Christ, even our views on the death and resurrection of Christ, I think are different, as far as who we are as Anabaptists. And I've always appreciated that focus for us as a church. So I think that's what we preach. Hopefully that's what we're preaching in most of our churches. But those are the things that we're emphasizing from the denomination. It's Christ-centered.
One of the questions, Addie.
I was just going to say, and there's your peace of mind, because it starts with the peace of Christ, and out of that we do our work.
Right. Every Sunday, so this, I'm gonna tell y'all the truth. On Sundays when people pass the peace, I don't like to do stuff if we don't really believe it, right? So so we go every Sunday, we go pass the peace, and peace of Christ be with you. We should mean that, right? Let's not just do stuff just to be doing it. I got others. I don't, especially after this COVID-19, I don't know how we're gonna pass the peace. After that, maybe we're gonna fist bump it or something.
In Manhattan Mennonite Fellowship, we were doing American Sign Language.
Oh, well, that's good. Whatever. So, but we should believe those things. If we're gonna take the time to do these ceremonies, if we're gonna sing our hymns in 4-part harmony, let's believe the stuff that's coming out of our mouth. We are supposed to be people of faith. I think that's the big difference, right? We don't always have to have evidence of what we want to happen. Listen, we have to believe it. Sometimes you have to walk in it. I work with people that don't believe in Jesus, that have that kind of faith, that speak things and manifest things in their life. And I don't get too deep, but I'm just saying that I see business people, that have decided we're going to do something, we're going to launch this project. They don't have faith rooted in Christ. They have faith rooted in money. The church, it should be better, right? Our faith is rooted in God. God has given us the Holy Spirit in order for us to achieve, to bring reconciliation, to bring healing to the world. We need to be the first partakers of our theology.
One question that came through is related to that. A question, I forget if it came through Facebook or an email that went up earlier. And it was, how do we as Christians and as Mennonites engage people of other faith? How do you recommend we engage people of other faiths who may have different understanding of how to build peace?
Mm-hmm.
How do we do that?
Peacefully. I think we do it peacefully. But also you use the example of when Jesus sent the disciples out. Sometimes, you go into towns, you go into places, you preach the gospel, you show people how to live. Again, you have to be a living witness to what God has done in your life. It doesn't do any good for you to tell people what they should be doing. It's better to show them what you are doing and how God has transformed you. But they also, the instruction Jesus gave them, you depend on these communities, you become a part of the community. So I believe that is that you get to know the community. You don't just swoop in like you're the savior, that you have all the answers. You go in with a learning posture into some of these situations, get to know people. But then at some point you may just have to shake the dust off your feet and leave. That they may not be receptive. Everybody's not going to be receptive, and it's okay. It's okay. You don't have to get mad at people. I see some of the protests and things that are going on in Michigan. People that are armed with AR-15s and 9mm strapped, and they're in the policeman's face just like that. They're yelling and screaming because someone doesn't agree with their point of view. We can't do that as people of peace. We have to be an example. We have to show people how we're living our lives. That's what I actually loved about Titus Peachy. I was like, man, this dude really believed the stuff that he's talking. He's really living this life of peace. And sometimes it costs him at his detriment. The sacrifices he's making, the places he's going, he's putting himself in peril for what he believes. And that's part of what's lacking, I think, in our American westernized version of Anabaptism. We don't want to sacrifice anything. I think this pandemic, this global pandemic, has taught us that we can do with a lot less of the creature comforts, and we can do with a lot less of this consumerism that I think the church has just been just as guilty as anyone else. I'm hoping that we don't go back to normal. I'm hoping that we pastors, if you're a pastor out there, I hope you've learned something different about what's important about doing church. Church is not just about your building. It's not just about, paying that mortgage each month. It's not about all of the stuff, the business that we have at church, this meeting. It's about caring for people, checking on people, making sure they're all right. Having, these shorter services, people are really engaged. And so I've gotten the opportunity to watch a number of pastors. And I say, okay, that pastor's doing pretty good. But it's simple. It's just simple preaching the word of God. I know we miss our singing. It's okay. I sing. I know we'll have to get back to singing. But all the other stuff, I hope that we reevaluate our lives as the church and say, what's unnecessary? Yeah. What do we have too much of? What can we just cast off? I hope we don't just, after this global pandemic is over, I hope we don't just heap all this stuff back. I hope we have less meetings. I hope we spend less money. I hope more of our money goes to setting up systems to help our communities, to practicing that mutual aid that I feel like we've probably lost. In the local conferences and congregations. How do we begin sharing as the people of God again and supporting each other? There have been some great stories that have come out of this. I've seen some great things in our Mennonite communities, but we just can't. I hope we don't try to flip the light switch back on and go back to what we were doing, December 31st, 2019.
So Glenn, would you say those are some of the ways that we are showing up? Like, we're not showing up with the AK-47 on the state capitol. Are those the kinds of ways that we're showing up? Are those our public witness sites, the communities, the systems, the structures, realigning our resources?
Yeah, we and sorry for brother that's doing translations, but I probably got a little bit fast on some of that. But I think we have been doing it for a while. There's some churches that are really working at immigration. Some are really concerned about, this food. We used to call it hunger. What do they call it now? Food insecurity. I think hunger is probably more appropriate.
Food rescue, food insecurity.
Yeah. And so, Jason, I know you all have been working at some of these things, and people in churches in New York, immigration. So I think we've been doing some good things in the church. Some of our thrift shops help to provide resources for people, jobs for people. Those are the things I think that we can't forget as we move forward. We may have to cut out some of these other programs that aren't as essential and figure out, how we're present in our community more. But I think I think a lot of churches, that's one of the beauties of being in this role, is seeing some of the good things that are going on throughout Mennonite Church USA, and why people love being a part of our church. So I think a lot of us are doing good work as Mennonites.
Yeah. You're talking kind of about the times that we're in. There've been a number of articles published recently about apocalypse, about this Greek concept. Mm-hmm. And some people have, talking about end times. We got murder hornets and all sorts of things happening right now.
Murder hornets, yeah.
But the articles that I've been reading are talking about the apocalypse, as in the Greek, the apocalypsis, that which reveals or unveils. Mm-hmm. And it seems that there is a lot of things being revealed in these times. The holes in the safety and society's mm-hmm. safety net, all sorts of things are being exposed in this time. Who has access and who doesn't, mm-hmm. who gets benefits and who doesn't. So how can we work toward peace? How can we work toward justice? How can we do these things while under quarantine?
Well, while under quarantine, I think people are doing it in different ways. Some people are, donating donating money. Some people are giving of their time to, connect and contact people just to make sure they're okay, to make sure they have what they need. And then some people are actually venturing out. Here in San Antonio, I think our food bank, I don't know, like tripled or something, like overnight, how many people were going to get fed. So there are many people that are going out there, to serve and to give and contribute. So I think you have to do what God places on your heart first and foremost. You have to do what you can do in a risky environment, with, if you're concerned about health, everyone can't do the same thing. I have a friend at a church in Hampton, Virginia. He got on Facebook every day and gave away like $50 to different people. And then people start donating. And so he was giving it to, healthcare workers, to first responders, to students, to single parents. And so there's some different ways we can do things creatively. We can drop off food for people that can't go out, checking on the elderly. There are many different ways in which we can contribute. But I think context is important. And the local community is really important. I hope you're supporting your congregations and your conferences during this time, because no one knows better than you what's going on. And, if we all kind of, not that we want to isolate ourselves, because I do believe in the global church, I believe in our national systems, but nobody knows better than you what's going on. The situation in San Antonio, Texas is much different than the situation in New York. We're spread out, we're a suburban type of place. We have a great food need, but it's easy for me to go contribute. And, I can walk outside my house and I don't have to see anybody really. You can't do some of those things in the city in New York. So you have to approach some of these things differently and take care of your family differently. But we just have to be creative and think what can we do, see what our friends are doing, and maybe get some inspiration that way.
So, Glenn, what are some of your own personal practices that you are doing in COVID-19 that are helping you to keep the peace of mind and also keep the peace?
I'll show you one. Hold on. Let me see it. I'm moving my camera. I don't want to do that. Y'all can see all my props, but this is one thing I'm doing. So I'm playing my guitar every day. I'm learning a new hobby. I got a new hobby, so I've been practicing this guitar for a while. But it's trying to create a routine. Praying in the morning, and part of that just helped me to center and focus on the important things of the day. Being kind to yourself. Don't think you can just like work an 8-hour day like you do at the office. It's not the same, because you have natural interruptions. You walk around at the office. It's not like being at your desk 8 hours. So give yourself some flexibility, some freedom to not be as productive as you think you should be. Also, exercise if you can, but just be kind to yourself, understanding that this is different. It's challenging for everyone. And so, just acknowledge that in your personal life, and try to figure out what type of routine that you can have that gives you some life, with prayer, exercise, and just something just like like playing this guitar that's gonna give me some sense of achievement, doing something while I'm locked in the house and not traveling.
Well, somebody put up a question. I couldn't see the fullness of it, but it was something about structures of peace building. One of the aspects of peace is creating these structures. So now that we're home, we have more reflection time. Now that we're seeing all the kinds of things that we know disrupt peace, we see many things are being revealed that we didn't see before. The disproportionate number of poor and people of color that have suffered from this virus. So those kinds of things. So what do you have to say to us that in this time of pause, we can sort of like get engaged in other kinds of ways, thinking about these systems, because our church actually has a lot of power that is.
Yeah. I think it's a little challenging right now, because there are specific things that we're focused on, and only so much that you can do. I think right now you can't, start thinking about, how do you, connect with, your government officials and people like that to bring about some change. Letting your voice be heard, I think, is a key thing. Someone is asking about like what structures you can create, without violence. we're a victim to this cultural violence, this gun culture in the U.S. I mean, part of what we can do is not participate in it and show people an alternative. I mean, that's what the Mennonites did for me. It's not like you have to go out and do these grand and glorious things all the time, but you can start transforming, individual lives. I mean, we do have to attack structures. I'm not saying that, but someone shared a message, gave me a vocabulary that I didn't have. Some people just don't know. So you can go and participate and share in different groups, be a part of different groups, and everyone's not going to be receptive, but you have to be present. Titus took the time to educate me and sit down and talk with me. It's the example that Jesus used when he reached out to people. He sat down with them. He got to know them. He talked to them. So that makes differences on individual levels. And then you have to educate yourself, make sure you're not getting caught up in all of the social media drama, all of that echo chamber of social media, but find out who has the information, who can bring about change, and then utilize that system. You learn the system that's problematic and learn how to change it. It may be voting. It may be, some of y'all may have different opinions on voting, but you may be voting, it may be showing up to meetings, it may be getting support from a number of people signing petitions. Be strategic. This is what I tell people. Stop having activism, attention deficit disorder. You can't just jump from one thing to the other. If you think about the civil rights movement and what was transformative about that, they were narrowly focused on one thing at a time. We're going to do the Montgomery bus boycott. It's going to last this many months, and we're going to stick with this one thing. We're going to pick up our neighbors. We're going to drive them to work so they don't have to ride the bus. You can't say, this week I'm boycotting Target. This week I'm boycotting Walmart. This week I'm divesting in oil. Yeah, you can do all those things and try to be a part of every movement, but you're not going to make effective change. You have to be strategic about what you want to change, and even in your peace activism. Find out what God is calling you to. What community is God calling you? Where are you empowered? Are you going to lead women? Do you have a voice with women? Do you have a voice with business people? Do you have a voice with children? That's your passion. We don't all have to engage everything equally, and we don't have to make other people engage things equally. So, really think about what you want to be involved in, where God is leading you. What's your vocation? What's that divine call? That's what I encourage people to do. What is the thing that, God is calling you to be a part of and change? And you go change it. I don't have to be as excited about it as you do. People always say, well, this, when people are asking for money in Mennonite Church USA, oh, this is great. This is so needed. I say, everything we do is needed. Work is important. All the work that we do is important, but my resources are limited. If you are passionate about that, you go get the support that you need, because there's somebody else just like you that's just as passionate, and figure out how to engage some of those systems. So that's kind of, I made that sound like real neat and tidy. I know it's not that neat and tidy. And there is some intersectionality that we have to work at. So I'm not discounting any of those things, but it all starts with us living out our call, having faith in where God is leading us, and starting to make those changes. But we have to educate ourselves. We have to be present in this work, and we have to be focused.
So you're telling us that each one teach one is pretty basic foundational stuff.
It is, and eventually you get to the systems that you need to change. You get to people. I have relationships with people that aren't in the system that have some influence and impact, but they have a relationship with me, and so maybe I will listen to them. There are a number of different ways in which you can change systems internally and externally, and there are different strategies and techniques that you need to use. But you really have to educate yourself, and I think eventually somebody has to do the work. You can't just be this thing. Oh, we're gonna boycott this. Well, who's in charge of it? Who's passionate about it? Who's really the driving force behind this movement? It can't just be social media, Facebook activism. And before my millennials and stuff say, oh yes, it can be. Yeah, but it's been shown that the Facebook movements, they have a big pop, right? They have a big pop, like they get a lot of attention, they get a lot of energy, and then all that energy dissipates because there's no one on the ground leading the movement. At the end of the day, it's going to take feet and hands on the ground to make sustainable, lasting change. Social media, the digital activism, you can get a lot of attention, a lot of excitement, but it's going to be somebody's going to have to do the hard work, type the emails, to write the letters, to go knock on some doors, to be present, to eventually get systemic, long-lasting change. That's my theory. You can disagree if you want.
Well, I think we're coming to close of our hour. I don't know, Addie, if you had any more questions or things that you'd like to share before the lightning round.
I think that was our last question.
Okay, wonderful. Right. Well, thank you everyone for coming. But before we close, because these conversations can kind of become a little deep and a little bit serious, we wanted to just do a quick lightning round with Glenn. I'm going to give you two things, and you choose which one.
Okay.
We're going dualistic right now.
Okay. All right. Dualistic.
And you give us whatever resonates most with you.
Okay.
Train or airplane?
Train, because I've always been fascinated by them.
Even though your wife is flight attendant.
Yeah, because I fly all the time. I fly all the time. I want to ride a train. They seem fun.
Amen. Phone call or text?
Oh, phone call. Text stresses me out.
Yeah. While walking or exercise, music or podcasts?
Ooh, music.
Music. A big party or a small gathering?
Big party.
Now, this next question comes out of your performance. This is at the conference where you did a live set with the band.
Yeah.
Nirvana or Nelly?
I'll take Nirvana. Nelly's kind of whack right now, so I'll take.
And you're Gen Xer, so that's probably a little closer. Grit, sugar or salt?
Oh my goodness, man! You gotta have salt and pepper on your grits if you're from the South. No question. Unless you're a baby.
Okay. I know there's heard some feelings out there. Charcoal or gas?
Oh man, charcoal all the way. Charcoal.
Beach or mountains?
Beach.
Upbeat or down tempo?
Upbeat.
God bless you, Glenn. Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks everybody that joined us. Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you, Glenn.
All right.
Thank you.
I go with you.
Amen. And if anyone would like to hang around, we'll do some breakout rooms afterwards. Otherwise, our time has come to a close. Next week, we'll have Stanley Hauerwas, the ethicist and theologian, joining us for a conversation. And every Tuesday at 5 o'clock for the next 8 weeks, we'll be meeting in this space via this link. A big thanks to Hermano Julio Pabon, who wins for Style Point. God bless you, brother, and thank you for being with us as well. Julio will be with us each week as well, so that there is more access. So if you speak Spanish, you'll be able to follow along with us.
Tell your friends to zoom in.
Amen. All right. God bless you, everyone. I'm going to send into breakout rooms.
You'll be able to chat with Glenn and do some personal questions that you didn't get asked.
Mm-hmm.
Get to ask.
Yeah. Man. We gotta now. I'm looking for the breakout rooms, Addie.
Oh.
And I'm not seeing that on the dashboard. I'm not sure why.
Okay.
But what if people would like to?
Maybe we'll share the screen if we can.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we'll just share the screen and just bring everybody together if you can.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Well, I'm just clicking the feature allow to talk. I don't know if there's a video, but maybe we can just open it up. Hope we got no Zoom bombers out there because we're giving everyone access right now.
That's a lot, yeah. Or you can do the question and answer thing too.
Oh yeah.
That little QA, if people want to type questions, maybe that'll be.
Okay, yeah. So if you'd like to ask a question, you can go over to Q&A and ask a question right there as well.
Oh, it goes for a little more.
Okay. Have a chat. Okay, thank you all.
No questions?
Amen. Well, it was a wonderful time, Glenn.
All right. Well, thank you.
for sharing this space with us.
Yeah.
Amen. So I think I'll end the meeting at this time.
Okay.
Merv says his question was answered. Good, Merv.
All right. Good, Merv.
Everyone have a good evening.
Thank you all so much. Zoom in
Yep.
next week.
All right.